I want to give a shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. Hey everybody, Matt here from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews. Over the last couple months, I have been doing a big countdown of the top 100 best fantasy books according to my viewers. There were over 500 people that chimed in. It took a survey to tell me what their favorite individual fantasy books are, and we've been going in batches of 20. So this is the last week. We are finally here for number 20 through number 1, and I'm really excited to go through this with you. And there are some big surprises here. So before we jump in, if you have not joined already, come join the Discord channel. I would love to talk to you about these books. That is where half the fun of this channel exists. It is the fastest growing, best adult fantasy Discord around, and click the link right down below to get access to that. So, starting with number 20, and number 20 has 44 votes, and it is The Fellowship of the Ring. This is book number 1 of 3 of The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is the highest rated Lord of the Ring book, according to you. It got 2 votes higher than Return of the King, which was in 22nd place, and 8 votes higher than The Two Towers, which was in 28th place. Personally, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, which is what the score is I gave all of the Lord of the Rings books. I really liked them, not loved them like almost everybody else does, but really, really liked them. And yeah, this one is, I'm kind of surprised actually that The Fellowship was the highest one. I kind of thought it would be Return of the King. But as I look at it, Fellowship had a lot of awesome stuff. I think my favorite parts are maybe parts that most people don't like, but I really loved like the first half of that book a lot. Getting that set up and learning about living the life of the hobbits when nothing really bad was going on was really fun. That slow adventure as you eventually get to where the elves live was really enjoyable. And yeah, you just get to find these characters and fall in love with them if you had not already from the movies. And yeah, really good stuff. But I am a little bit shocked that it's the highest rated of the Lord of the Rings books. Number 18 is a two-way tie with 45 votes, and the first of those is The Well of Ascension. This is book number 2 of 3 of the first era of Mistborn, which is the first trilogy, and this is by Brandon Sanderson. I gave this one 4 stars, and I think as I look back on it, that's a fair rating from me. I really love the first book, I really love the third book, but the second one just is kind of the classic middle book syndrome for me, where it really doesn't know what it's trying to be. And as an individual story, right? Like clearly Brandon Sanderson's awesome and he really plots his stories out. But, I think a lot of middle books in a trilogy feel like a complete story. This one didn't end amazing, like almost all Brandon Sanderson books do. It just kind of felt like a middle book. And what I want out of a middle book is to feel like I get a complete story going on. As I think about the first book, I have these amazing wow moments. As I think about the third book, there's these amazing twists and turns and mind-blowing revelations. And when I think about the second book, it just feels like a middle book. And that's not the feeling that I want, but it's still a 4 out of 5. I really liked it, but it's got nothing compared to the first and third for me. So, also tied at number 18, the last of this two-way tie with 45 votes, is The Sword of Kagan, or Kagan. I don't really know how to say that, but I will soon, because I am doing a buddy read of this starting on July 18th on my Discord. This is a standalone by M.L. Wang, and yeah, the buddy read, I'm really looking forward to it, because this is the highest rated book by far that I have never read before. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I really encourage you to join along with me. There's like 30 or 40 people already committed to doing this, which is awesome. Really fun environment. And yeah, I know nothing about this book. That's why I'm kind of rambling about this part of it, because I've intentionally isolated myself from knowing anything other than what the cover looks like. I don't even know what the back blurb says. But I'm looking forward to joining that adventure. And in the next few weeks, you're going to get a review of this book on this channel. Jumping up to number 16, we have another two-way tie, and I think this is the last of the ties. And this is at 49 votes, and it is Before They're Hanged. This is book number 2 of 3 of the first trilogy from the First Law by Joe Abercrombie. I gave it 5 stars, and I am currently in the midst of doing a reread of this via audiobook. It's my least favorite of the trilogy. In fact, I think it's my least favorite if you look at the first trilogy and the second trilogy combined. It is, again, a very middle book story, but unlike the Well of Ascension, from beginning to end, I just had an amazing time. And, I think the writing quality of Joe Abercrombie is kind of peak fantasy. It's just incredible writing. And the audiobook that I listened to by Stephen Pacey is, without a doubt for me, the greatest audiobook narration for a fantasy series that I've ever listened to. And it really just heightens my enjoyment. And yeah, it's a wonderful book that just has an ending problem. But the journey is there, and it's a really fun journey. So, moving to also tied at number 16, that last of the two-way tie with 49 votes is A Clash of Kings. This is book number 2 of 5, with 7 ultimately planned, of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I gave this one 5 stars. It was my favorite book that I'd ever read for a little bit of time until I read the third book that you're going to hear about later on in this video. And yeah, this is great. And it kind of beginning, middle, and end, this book is awesome. It's an improvement upon A Game of Thrones, the first book in the series, in basically every way. And I say that with a lot of love because I love the first book in A Song of Ice and Fire. It's just amazing. And I think over time I've come to even like this series more. And I'm really, really looking forward to doing a reread because as I think about books, I often find myself benchmarking them to A Song of Ice and Fire. I don't know why, but I'll say was it better than a Song of Ice and Fire, or was it worse? Because A Song of Ice and Fire is just incredible. And in my opinion, this is the second best of that series, and which makes it one of the best books of all time. At number 15, with 50 votes, is Oathbringer. This is book number 3 of 4, with 10 eventually planned, of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5, which is my lowest score for any Stormlight Chronicle book. And this book it's Stormlight. What can I say? It expands the story in so many ways, really just starts to broaden out the story in a much bigger way than the previous 2 books did. And again, I kind of felt like this book had an ending problem, and I'm kind of isolated on this because a lot of people say this is their favorite Stormlight book. And they say it because the ending. And the ending was the weakest part of the book for me. It was over the top. In a bad way. I still really liked it, but it was too much for too long. It made the climax over the top. I liked the more isolated climax moments that you got from the other 3 books in the series more than I liked it here. There was just too much going on. But still, good stuff, great book. And yeah, I do look forward to eventually doing a reread of that chonker of a book. Number 14 with 58 votes is A Memory of Light. This is the final book, book number 14 in the Wheel of Time by Brandon Sanderson, a series that was originally written by Robert Jordan. I think they are co-written on this, I think is the way it's written. This is the highest rated Wheel of Time book, which is 15 votes higher than The Shadow Rising, which was down in 21st place last week. I give this one 5 stars. It is my favorite, just like the most of you say. It is my favorite Wheel of Time book. And, I do find myself liking the Sanderson books more than the Robert Jordan books in general. I just thought his writing was a little more snappy, and it worked better. He kind of brought it all home in a much more succinct way that kind of needed to be done. I think the tremendous effort it took to be able to write and follow up an amazing author and do it in an even better way is just monumental. I found the climax to this story just incredible in so many ways. I mean, it was over the top, even more so than Oathbringer was, but it's the final book in the series. It needed to be done. I loved the ending, and I loved that the ending, without spoiling anything, didn't try to tie up every single little loose knot. I think a lot of fantasy series would have ended the last few pages in a different way, and I really like the way this one ended. Book number 13 on this list with 59 votes is Memories of Ice. This is book number 3 of 10 of Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. This is the highest rated Malazan books, 22 votes higher than Dead House Gates, which was down in 26th place. I give this one a top of the top 5-star rating. When I did my top 100 favorite books, this was a top 5 favorite book for me. It's since fallen a little bit just because I've read other books that I've liked a little bit more. But this book's incredible. This is the molasses book of the fall book everybody tells you is the one you need to get to know whether you're going to like the series or not like the series, which is a horrible thing to say because each of these books is like 1,000 pages. So like, you know, you got to read 3,000 pages to know if the series works for you or not, which is a really hard thing for a lot of people. But I think in a lot of ways they're right because, you know, I think if you hate the series, you're not going to like this one. But if you're feeling pretty good about it, at least so-so to good, I think when you read this one, you're going to get your mind blown. It's incredible for so many reasons. It just took all of the amazing writing from the first two and ratcheted it up quite a few notches. And yeah, it's just, I think about this book, so many scenes from this book a lot. And it makes me really, really excited to do my reread of it sometime in the next 6 months or so. And yeah, just thoroughly looking forward to that. Number 11 is a two-way tie. So I lied earlier when I said there's no more ties, but I think this is the last of the ties. And this has 60 votes. It is The Hobbit. This is a standalone from the Middle-earth universe by J.R.R. Tolkien. I gave this one 4 stars. I cannot believe that The Hobbit is ranked higher than all of the books from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I cannot conceive of how that is possible. Not only do I just disagree with that assessment, but I would have thought that all of you would have as well. What is this book doing up so high? It's a kid's book, and it's good, it's entertaining, but is it better than all the other books on this list that were before this? There's no way that's true. I think there's a lot of nostalgia going on here, which is cool. You know, I fall for nostalgia. I think most people do. You know, things that you liked as a kid are going to stick with you in a much more impactful way. It's just the way that life works, and I think it definitely is the way it worked here, because I think if you're a fan of fantasy, if you're watching this video and you're a big fantasy nerd like I am, you read this when you were a kid. So yeah, I look forward to rereading this to my kids, and maybe they're going to say it's one of their favorite books because of that total nostalgia kicking in. But yeah, that's what's going on here, right? Now, also at number 11, the last of the two-way tie with 60 votes is Jade Legacy. This is book number 3 of 3 from the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. This is the highest rated Greenbone Saga book, 33 votes higher than Jade City, which was all the way down at 37th place. I gave this one 5 stars. I do agree that this is the best Greenbone Saga book. Like, the smallest little tad better than Jade War. And again, kind of shocked that Jade War was the least favorite of the Greenbone Saga books, but it was also on this list, so to be a top 100 favorite fantasy book is, you know, no small achievement. This book's awesome. And I could say so much stuff about this book, but the one thing I'll say in the short amount of time that I have is that it just utilized time jumps in such an amazing way. I love a series that has the bravery to institute a time jump and to say, let's now move on to the next generation of people. And, you know, to do that in the 3rd book in a series takes a lot of bravery, a lot of guts. And I think Fonda Lee pulled it off magnificently. And it really elevated this book for me in that it was pulled off so well. Now at number 10 with 63 votes is The Blade itself. This is book number 1 of 3 of the first trilogy from The First Law by Joe Abercrombie. I gave this one 5 stars. I did a reread of this last month, and I just felt over the moon about it. When I first read it, I really, really, really liked it. But when I reread it, I loved it to, you know, even more. This is where the series starts. And this is where this incredible series begins. It's a slow book. It doesn't have a major plot to talk about. So what's it doing so high up on the list? It's so high up on the list because it starts off this wonderful series, but it also introduces you to some of the greatest characters in all of fantasy. And the writing quality is just so dang good that I think when people first read it, they kind of get their mind blown. And now some people read it and they're kind of plot first readers. I kind of look at myself as a big kind of mix. I like a lot of different stuff, right? But I was able to personally appreciate, like, look, the plot's not there, but the writing quality is. And oh, what writing quality it is that made me just fall in love with this book and this series. Number 9, with 85 votes, which is a huge jump from number 10, which had 63 votes, is The Hero of Ages. This is book number 3 of 3 of the first trilogy from Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and I gave this 5 stars. It's a wonderful book. It's by far the best of the Mistborn books. When you include Era 2 and Era 1 together, it's miles beyond the next best book, which was the first book in the series. And it's so good for me because without spoiling anything, it just has some revelations that hit you that do something that is kind of perfection, and that it makes you rethink about the whole series in a different way. But fairly, the groundwork has been being laid from page 1 to blow your mind. And I should have figured it out. You should have figured it out. But I don't think a lot of people did. And so when this piece of info hits you, it really, really hits you. You know, it's the opposite of those like detective movies where at the end of the movie, you find out like, oh, that's who did it. I would have had no way of figuring that out. Cool story. But yeah, just a surprise for the sake of being a surprise. Not this one. The groundwork is being laid from the beginning, and it's just a masterful, masterful piece of writing. At number 8, with 93 votes, is A Game of Thrones. This is book number 1 of 5 with 7 planned from A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I gave this one 5 stars. This book reignited my love for fantasy. I watched one episode of the Game of Thrones series, and as soon as that episode ended, I went and read this book before I watched the next episode. I didn't want to be spoiled about anything because I knew there was something special here. And oh, what a book this was. It in many ways, it was kind of a perfect fantasy story for a beginning book. The world building is just incredible. The characters are amazing. The plot is truly great. The world building, did I say that? It's perfect. It's just everything is here. And I just love the story so much. Number 7, with 96 votes, is The Lies of Loch Lamora. This is book number 1 of 3, and who knows how many are planned, of the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. This is, without any doubt, this was always going to be the highest rated Gentleman Bastard book. The other 2 aren't even on this top 100 list. I gave this 5 stars both times that I read this, and I actually just finished my buddy read of this, which is my first reread. And it was the first buddy read that I did on my Discord server. And yeah, it's just, it's crazy good. It's a perfect book for me. I think a lot of the books going here forward from me personally are perfect books. The writing is just so good. The audiobook narration is so good. This is a plot heavy book where it just makes you think. It's an amazing heist story. I don't always love heist stories, but this is just done to perfection. The writing is so good. And I just urge everybody to read this if they haven't done it yet. It's a little darker in tone, so you got to be okay with that. But yeah, just wonderful. Number 6, with 104 votes, is The Final Empire. This is book number 1 of 3 of the first trilogy from Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This is the highest rated Mistborn book, 19 votes higher than The Hero of Ages, which we just heard about a little bit ago, which was in 9th place. I gave it 5 stars. All 3 books in the series are in the top 20, which is a crazy good feat. I don't know how this book is rated higher than the final book in this series, but it is what it is. This is another heist story. It's really fun. It's a 3 to 4 out of 5 book, in my opinion, up until the final climax of the story. And that climax blew my mind. I'll never forget the feelings that I went through reading that final arc of the story, and it just elevated this to a very top tier 5 out of 5, which tells you how good that ending really is. Number 5, with 113 votes, is The Last Argument of Kings. This is book number 3 of 3 of the first trilogy of the First Law by Joe Abercrombie. This is the highest rated First Law book, 50 votes higher than The Blade itself, which was down in 10th place. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. In fact, all 9 books of Abercrombie that are in the First Law series, the novels, show up in this top 100. It's the most amount, it's the So there's several books in this top 100 list where all the books in the series were on this list. Stormlight Archive had this. Greenbone Saga had this. But this is the series with the most amount of books. Stormlight was 4. Mistborn Era 1 was 3. Greenbone 3. But to have 9 is just incredible. That shows you how beloved the first law is. And none of these books show up, in the top 5. It's just they're all quality. And yeah, it's probably my most recommended series for people because I think all of the books are hits. Now, number 4, with 131 votes, is The Name of the Wind. This is book number 1 of 2, with 3 eventually planned, whenever that third one finally comes out, by Patrick Rothfuss. Again, no confusion here. This is the highest rated Kingkiller book, almost 100 votes higher than The Wise Man's Fear, which was down in 26th place. I gave this 5 stars. I recently reread this book, and while I loved it the first time, I loved it even more the second time. I have a lot of fond memories of this. I read it while I was on my honeymoon, and 9 years ago, and yeah, it's just awesome. It's a little more YA. It's not. But it has a lot of YA elements to it. The plot isn't crazy good. The writing quality is as high as it gets. It's just the prose of Rothfuss is in many ways unmatched for modern day fantasy. And that's why you read this story. Because if it didn't have that, this would be a mediocre story. But fortunately it did, which is why it is so beloved. Number 3, with 156 votes, is Words of Radiance. This is book number 2 of 4, with 10 eventually planned in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I gave this one 5 stars. It's my favorite, without a close number 2 of the Stormlight Archive. This is one of the most perfect books that I've ever read. It just took all of the foundation from that first book and elevated it to a very high level. I think this is why so many people claim this is their favorite book of all time, because it's so good. You didn't need that lead up of this kind of slow beginning that the first book, The Way of the Kings, had, which a lot of people complain about. I've heard a lot of people drop off that book because they're like, oh, this series is a very slow series. No, that book was. The rest of them are very fast-paced. But yeah, just wonderful stuff, and it's a large reason that this is one of my favorite series of all time. At number 2, a big surprise for me with 169 votes, is The Way of Kings. This is book number 1 of 4 of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, and I can't believe this is the highest rated Sanderson book. I don't know that I've ever met somebody that claims this book is better than Words of Radiance. So what's happening? I don't quite understand it. It's the biggest surprise, I think, out of anything on this top 100. I just genuinely don't get it. I love The Way of Kings, don't get me wrong. But, I've never heard this opinion. Is it out there? Do you feel that way? Let me know. And why do you feel that way? Because I just can't conceive of why somebody would feel differently. My opinion is not right or wrong. It's just my opinion. But I'm genuinely curious why people would feel like this one is better than the second book, when I've never even heard that before. And I talked to a lot of people about fantasy. Finally, we are going to go down to number 1 with a whopping 175 votes. It is A Storm of Swords. This is book number 3 of 5, with 7 planned, from A Song of Ice and Fire by J.R.R. Martin. This is about 80 votes higher than A Game of Thrones, which is the second highest. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It is one of my top 5 or 10 favorite books of all time. It held the mantle for the best fantasy book I ever read for a really long time. I was obsessed with this book. I still am. It's got these moments that I can't even say the name of them because I feel like it would ruin things. You know what I'm talking about. It's got a lot of moments. A couple huge ones that just, I feel like, changed a lot of the course for modern fantasy in a very good way, in a more grimdark way. It was not afraid to pull punches and to do stuff that, while it's been done before, just took it to a different level. And I'm really happy that this book is number 1. I'm really surprised this book is number 1. I always see this book as a top 5 fantasy book. I never see it number 1. I always see Sanderson as number 1. And while I love Sanderson, and I love George R. R. Martin, It's cool that my viewers have a little bit of a different taste than I think the average list that you're going to see. So that is it. We're finally done with this list. I had a lot of fun going about this. Again, if you want to chat about this stuff, leave a comment down below. But even better yet, join the Discord. Let's chat about it. So we're going to end off there. Thank you so much for watching this. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, Brian, CJ, Darren, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Ben, Blair, Brock, Evan, Jen B, Harry B, Jamie, Jeff Pixler, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion.